In preparing to speak with you this morning, I had the idea that I would learn how to say "the Lord be with you" in Gaelic. But all I could manage to learn was Matin va, good morning. And hopefully no one is here that knows how that's really supposed to sound. Today we're talking about being prepared. What is your definition of being prepared? What do you think of when you think of preparedness? Maybe studying, being trained, imagining what questions you may be asked, feeling confident in your response. Or do you think of feeling calm, sure-footed, and ready for anything? As Matthew speaks in Jesus' message of being ready, being watchful, for you know not the day or the hour, of being prepared, we know that it's getting closer to the time of the crucifixion. We can read in history the fall of Jerusalem and see it as a regional historical event, but when Jesus spoke of it, it wove into God's judgment and the end of the world. Everyone in Jesus' time wanted to know when. When is all this going to happen? And in chapter 24 of Matthew, that we haven't heard in the last few weeks, Jesus began to respond to the question of when by saying, even the angels in heaven don't know when the Son of Man is coming. So stay awake, be watchful and ready. We always want to know when as well, so we can prepare ourselves. We have difficulty thinking in terms of being prepared in our heart, though, rather thinking of it as a mind, body, and action preparedness. In other words, we think of being prepared as a physical and mental thing, rather than a soulful preparedness, an open and inviting heart. In many ways, being prepared in our heart is more difficult than being prepared physically, like many of us may have prepared this morning by wearing of tartan, maybe having some earplugs or headphones handy, or by learning a Gaelic phrase. No, preparing our heart requires change. Chapter 25 of Matthew begins with our parable in the gospel today of the 10 bridesmaids. This is the first of 3 parables in which Jesus describes what it will be like when the Son of Man comes for final judgment. The Greek described this with one word, parousia. This parable is full of metaphors regarding what will occur if we're not ready when Jesus comes. Jesus is the bridegroom who has been delayed, and he comes at an odd hour. Midnight is an odd time for a wedding, unless it's New Year's Eve, right? All the more reason to be prepared at midnight. During this period, it is thought that the practice was to light the way for the bridegroom to process to the bride's father's house as a part of the symbolic act of marriage. A bride leaves her father and goes to her groom. It's not clear whether the wedding feast is held at the groom's house or at the bride's father's home, but if you're not there on time, you can't get in. All those invited and prepared will be on time for the wedding feast, the kingdom of heaven. It is a tragedy that the bridesmaids are turned away. We see these 5 bridesmaids coming back after getting their lanterns filled with oil again. They knock on the door begging to come in, but are turned away. The Lord responds by saying, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Keep awake, therefore. You know neither the day nor the hour. We worry just as the people in Jesus' time worried. Will we be ready for the return of the Son of Man? And how can we be prepared as we walk around our lives full of worldly distractions and worldly accomplishments, responsibilities, the war, and tragedy? Will we be allowed into the wedding feast? It is through true hope, mercy, and the never-ending grace of God, which is renewed every single day, which prepares us. We must trust not in ourselves, but in God's grace and mercy. This morning we see and hear God's grace in the sound of the pipes and drums. Words cannot describe God's gift of music to us. I tried. I cannot describe the beauty. Coming from someone of Scottish descent, the bagpipe is one of the most beautiful sounds I've ever heard. It's difficult to imagine that they were once considered treasonous and an act of war, as they were played during the Jacobite uprising and at the Battle of Culloden. An act was passed by the English Parliament making the carrying of weapons such as the vicious bagpipes and the wearing of kilts a punishable offense. For you could be punished with a fine, jail time, or involuntary relocation. The Act of Proscription, also known as the Disarming of the Highlands Act, was thankfully repealed in 1782. And over a long time, things changed so much that the British Army often put Highland pipers at the head of the regiments heading into battle. Also late in the 1700s, across the pond here in the colonies, Samuel Seabury began to join protests against the Continental Congress. Reverend Seabury was born in Connecticut and ordained priest in England in 1753. Seabury was not alone in his support for the crown, as this position was similar to other clergy in the New England area. Seabury's writings and disputes with Alexander Hamilton are documented historically, as well as being immortalized in the Broadway musical Hamilton, which you may have heard of. Seabury was even arrested in November 1775 by local patriots and was in prison in Connecticut for 6 weeks. In March 1783, Seabury was elected bishop. However, there were no Anglican bishops in the America, the colonies, to consecrate him. So he sailed to London in July, possibly in anticipation of the end of the Revolutionary War, because peace negotiations had begun in 1782. England, however, would not consecrate him because he was an American citizen and could no longer take the oath of allegiance to the king. Reverend Seabury was consecrated bishop in Aberdeen, Scotland on November 14, 1784, which is his feast day and why we celebrate Scotland today. He was consecrated on the condition that he studied the Scottish rite of Holy Communion and worked for its adoption rather than that of the 1662 English prayer book. Our liturgy reflects Bishop Seabury's attention to the Scottish rite. Oddly enough, Seabury's consecration brought about a change in the British Parliament to create a provision for the ordination of foreign bishops. May we, as Bishop Seabury and others who went before us, strive to be prepared for the glory of God here on earth as in heaven. Not only through our words and actions, but through humility and thankfulness for the grace of God that is so freely given. By opening our minds and our hearts and our souls to the glory of God. In closing, I would like to share a reading from 1 Peter that was prayed yesterday at the closing of the diocesan convention. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be serious and discipline yourselves for the sake of your prayers. Above all, maintain constant love for another, for love conquers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you have received. Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen.